Canucks are definitely looking at the market for both players, and you should be prepared for all outcomes. There's really three of them. Neither gets dealt, one gets dealt, or both gets dealt.
That is all possible scenarios.
That is Elliot Friedman on J.T. Miller and Elias Pettersson. And
he didn't say anything.
No, he's laying it out. They could have both been waived.
The reality
one gets waived, or neither gets waived.
That's everything. You didn't say anything.
They've got no moves. They can't get waived.
Oh, shoot.
Now,
then he did say everything.
The interesting part about this is it's not really that sentence. It's the and Julie and Chris talked about this too. They did a great breakdown. The key is that at game 40 or 41, wherever the Canucks are, we're talking about one of their two best pieces being moved. And the fact is, the Canucks management has put it out there to the media that, hey, we're looking at both. I don't believe that. I think this is their way of saying both of you guys need to grow up. I don't believe for a second that the Canucks are looking at markets for both players. I think they're looking at markets for one of the players. I don't know which one, but I do not believe in my heart of hearts that the Canucks don't know which one they'd rather trade and which one they'd rather hang on to. They just don't want that out there publicly.
I don't get why. Like, listen, whatever's going on here, we obviously don't know the full story, but there is obviously a story.
Yeah.
I thought it was adorable that the Canucks have, or not the Canucks really, but Miller and Pettersson specifically tried to pretend this wasn't a thing. Like, I've known about this for like a year.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very poorly kept secret with the Vancouver Canucks organization that these two don't like each other. What I don't understand, like, it's hard to make a good team in the NHL. It's hard to find star talent in the NHL. And with the Canucks, there's a lot of suffering there involved in these two players. You picked 5th overall. That means things didn't go well. And you nailed it. You nailed the 5th overall pick with Elias Pettersson. You acquired J.T. Miller for a first-round pick, I want to say a year after you didn't make the playoffs. You traded a first-round pick for that player. You nuts? And he was probably their MVP during that COVID bubble.
Oh, yeah.
And everything. Then the Canadian season, he just completely was, I only feel like playing 100 of the 200 feet. But then JT Miller goes right back to being a killer for the team. Quinn Hughes emerges. You gain a little bit of stability in net because Demko's back and Lankinen's been unreal. And you had Archer Seelovs, who was so good for you.
In the playoffs, yeah.
There's a lot of things going really well for the Canucks, and there's plenty of reason to believe this team can go on a deep run. And maybe should have gone on a deeper one last year if Besser doesn't get hurt before Game 7. Or, no, it was a blood clot before Game 7. The fact these two can't see past their dislike of each other, I think, is so short-sighted. Like, it's funny that we're talking about this today because my For You page on TikTok brought up it was a podcast clip. Matt Barnes, I think is the guy's name. He was hosting a show with Kevin Durant on it. And they were talking about, do you remember when Draymond Green basically said to Kevin Durant, like, we won without you, we don't need you?
Yes.
Like, what an unbelievable, unforced error. Like, if you two can just get along, literally shut up. Like, just enjoy. I'm not even asking you to enjoy each other's company. I'm asking you to be amicable coworkers. You'll win. You know how we know that? You won multiple championships together, and now all of a sudden you don't like each other, and now all of a sudden you're telling them, like, we won without you. Okay, we won with you also. It'll be way easier to win with you. One of the wildest things, one of the wildest stretches of hockey I think we've seen out of a duo of players is when Rick Tocchet was the new coach of the Vancouver Canucks. He puts JT Miller and Elias Pettersson together on the penalty kill, and they were outscoring the opponent's power play. They were friggin' murderers together. I don't understand why they can't see past it.
I also want to say that people forget the Vancouver Canucks took the Edmonton Oilers to 7 games last year without their starting goaltender and without Brock Besser going into Game 7.
Exactly.
Like this is a very good hockey team that currently sits with only 44 points. I know the West is stronger this year, but they are in the last wild card spot, a point up on the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, but
they're better than that.
At the beginning of the year, knowing how few games Demko was going to play, you probably take that, right? Like,
I think you want more than that.
I think you do. No, but like I'm saying, at this point in the season, you go, all right, we didn't have our starting goalie, who's like probably a top 10 starter when he's healthy.
Yep.
We don't have him for nearly half the season. Are we in the playoff conversation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then we know when we get him back, we're going to take off and we'll make the playoffs pretty comfortably, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the beginning of the season, I think you take this outcome. You're not going to get a great return for Pettersson, or you're not going to get Pettersson return for Pettersson. Are you going to get Miller return for Miller? The easiest and best outcome is they simply work together. I can't understand. I don't know what the cardinal sin either of them is committed that one can't forgive the other or whatever.
Right.
Maybe we'll never know the real answer. Maybe they just can't stand each other. But man, you gotta. I'm trying to remember who told me this story, but like PK Subban used to grind people's gears. But
I can see why.
Yeah, sure.
The guy's like, he's got golden retriever energy.
Yeah, but guys were like, yeah, but then the playoffs come around and he's
an absolute monster.
Crazy.
Yeah.
He's a gamer. Both those guys are gamers. I don't get it.
Well, and I think there's a thing that leads me to believe if all things were equal, the Canucks would probably lean towards keeping JT Miller. And it comes down to a quote from Patrick Alvin, and he said that Pettersson needs more maturity. And they rebuilt that second line. That Alvin quote, by the way, was from like last week. They rebuilt that second line after the playoffs last year because they were playing him with guys that I'd never heard of. And I'm like, how come I've never heard of this guy? It's like, oh yeah, because he's only played 3 NHL games. And he's gonna be in the second line against Edmonton. That's cool. Great. So they go out, they get Jake DeBrusk. And Pettersson's still sluggish to start. And I think what it comes down to from things I've watched and heard, whatever, is that JT Miller is almost like a Blake Wheeler light. I don't want to quite put it on Blake Wheeler level because Blake Wheeler went over the line many, many times in Winnipeg to the point where him and Scheifele and then the rest of the guys, there was a lot of hatred in that dressing room. And Miller is a leader on this team, has been for half a decade, but if he's chirping at you on the bench about, hey, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, and then you show JT Miller him playing defense the majority of the time, like before Tocchet got there, I'd be like, I don't give a shit what your opinion is. Try harder.
Yeah, what about you?
You have all the talent in the world. Try harder.
Yeah, worry about your house.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think in letting that slip, with Alvin letting that slip, Pettersson's deal's harder to move. It's $11.5 million. It's just the reality of it. But if you move on from him, Miller had an unbelievable playoff last year. And
Pettersson did not.
And he didn't. Now, again, go back and look at the game logs. Go look at who he was playing with.
Yeah.
But at $11.5 million, what do we say in Toronto?
Find a way.
Doesn't matter, right?
Doesn't matter.
Got to drive that line, don't you?
Brad Richardson was on Missing Curfew talking about it, and he played with these two guys. And the feedback he basically gave is Miller is just on Pettersson, like on him. And the feedback was, you're going to lose this kid. Like, there is a skill to delivering a message.
Yeah, and JT Miller doesn't have a skill at delivering any message.
What?
Just watch him in front of the media. And Vancouver media is tough, but yeah.
In front of his teammates.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean, though, still.
Like, think of how complimentary people are of Luke Shen and the kind of guy he is, right? And, they were going at it and everything. This isn't to say Miller's a bad guy or a bad player, but like communication is a skill. And the guy I think about in all this, people keep talking about Rick Tocchet because, when he was hired, like, didn't it seem like he was basically the Miller whisperer? Like that was basically his entire job. Hey, you figured out Kessel and Malkin. You can figure out this guy. Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is younger than Elias Pettersson. And I think your captain needs to be able to tell anyone in that room to fuck off if he has to. Can he? Like, he's obviously one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He's probably going to win himself another Norris. You could argue he's the best defenseman in the NHL. I think at minimum he's been the best defenseman in the NHL this season. It's not about that. The Canucks don't have a talent problem. They have a room management problem. And who's helping this kid manage this situation? There's a vacuum here because Miller's supposed to be one of the leaders. Pettersson is too.
Well, whether you wear the A or not, the contract says you're a leader.
The contract says you're a leader. The point total that is expected of you says you're a leader. And the exact same thing goes for Miller.
Jesse, what do you have there on the screen?
No, I just wanted to ask Steve a question.
Go, get in there.
I just want to know, like, you're...
Okay.
Because you brought up something interesting with Hughes, and do you think that there's a reluctance from Vancouver fans or Vancouver media to put some of this onus on Quinn Hughes?
Oh, 100%.
Because of who he is, and he's a great personality, and everybody loves him, fan favorite, obviously. Yes. But as the captain, should not some of this responsibility fall on him in controlling the room, or is that, do you think, outside of his role?
It's definitely inside his role. But talk to Yvan Cournoyer at the 2010 Olympics. And when he was talking about the dynasty Montreal Canadiens of the 70s, he was talking about our room had 14 captains, right? So Quinn Hughes is the captain, and that makes him the leader in a room full of leaders, right? But he's the biggest one. He's the most important one. He wears the C. It is a committee job. Who's helping him? It can't just be the coach. The coach's job is totally different from the captain's, I think. The message has to also come from the players. Who is helping this kid manage the situation? And it just came out of me. Like I said, he's a kid. Some people are really mature at a young age. Landeskog was captain at whatever, and Taves was captain at whatever, and Crosby was captain at whatever. But you can't tell me Crosby isn't a better leader now than when he was 20 or 21. Of course he is. He's just a more well-rounded person. That's how life is generally supposed to work. So when you say onus, I'm worried about that wording because it's a lot of responsibility for Quinn, but who is helping him? It can't just be him. He could have some sort of big, blustery blow up publicly or in the room, that we never necessarily hear about. He needs to be backed up. And I don't think it can necessarily seem like a taking sides thing. It's one thing if he blows up a Miller and Pettersson stands up and goes, yeah. I think that's going to fall on deaf ears and vice versa. Who's helping him? Is it DeBrusk? Is it Besser? Is it Tyler Myers has been in the NHL for a very long time.
Thatcher Demko, maybe?
The goalie?
Yeah, but he's one of the best players on the team and highly respected.
I don't think goalies really take that role in locker rooms.
Wasn't that a Bieksa story about Luongo when he was captain and he stood up and he was like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was just sort of like,
that's the goal.
Okay, thanks, Lou.
Right.
It's the goalie, right? Hronik's out and he's a somewhat young player too. Who is helping this kid?
Yeah, it sounds like they've lost control over the entire locker room.
And Tocchet was, as you mentioned earlier, the guy that was able to keep peace between Phil Kessel and Evgeny Malkin long enough to win a cup. And two.
Look where they are in the standing. Like, this isn't the Rangers. The Canucks are not the Rangers.
No.
Like, this is a fixable situation.
Well, they're saying, though, like the fact that it's erupted at this point leads a lot of people to believe that it might not be. And I know usually the usual outcome is the most boring, which is nobody gets traded. But you do have a willing suitor for JT Miller in the New York Rangers. They want this guy bad.
And everyone.
I don't blame them.
Everyone should want JT Miller. He's a good hockey player.
Do you think, guys, that this ends in a trade or this ends in went away?
I worry about the long-term success about the Canucks this season because if you look at their last 12 games, they are 4-4-4. They have 12 points in 12 games, which is a terrible 82-game pace, and that's not a short amount of time. That's the last 4 weeks. I know the Christmas break is in there, but that's not an insignificant amount of time considering right now Hughes and Pettersson are traveling with the team, but they are still out. They are not playing. They didn't play the last game. Demko had back spasms. He had to leave the game on, what was that, Saturday? And Lankinen comes in, saves the day. They win in a shootout and all that, but now he has back spasms. I don't know how long that's going to be. And then Hronek's been out for the whole season. So you got 4 guys who are like the pillar of your team plus JT Miller there. So 4 out of the 5 guys you look to being the anchors of this team are out. And like injuries can change day to day. Maybe they're all back in the lineup tomorrow. But it's considering they weren't playing well for the last 4 weeks and now everybody's kind of hurt and then the locker room sucks. I worry about this winter and them just floating the boat enough to get into the playoffs.